Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin playlist and War in Ukraine playlist. Today, I'd like to talk about two important events that happened this week that ended. Uh, the East Economic Forum in Vladivostok and a meeting of Ukraine's allies in Ramstein, Germany. And the message of the two presidents. What did President Putin say that is different and new, and what was decided at Ramstein? In other words, the title of today's presentation is What is the message to the world and to the domestic audience by Zelensky and by Putin? I shall start with President Putin because he did say something new that was not the case a week ago when during the troubles in the Kursk province. What Putin said that is of significance in regard to the war in Ukraine is that the peace offer that he first articulated in June this year is still on the table. So he repeated that Russian conditions for peace are the same as they were in June, which is 4 provinces of Donbass, Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, plus no membership of NATO to Ukraine, or to put it differently, which slightly changes the picture, is no expansion of NATO. Now, it's significant that he did not specify about the denazification, demilitarization. Maybe this was assumed, but in any case, what is new is that a week ago, President Putin said there was no negotiations with Ukraine, meaning no negotiations with Zelensky. Today, he didn't mention Zelensky specifically by name, but he said with those who had organized this adventure into Kursk province, which basically implies that Russia is ready to resume negotiations for peace, and the conditions are pretty much the same as they were in Istanbul. Plus the changed situation, which means no longer autonomy for Donbass, but Donbass will be incorporated into Russia. So this is the message, but there's more to it than just that. The question, of course, is for the analyst, why is he doing that? What is behind this slight change of accent? And my understanding is that President Putin's priority now has slightly shifted. Of course, he's following, and he has daily, 3 times a day, reports on the war in Ukraine, and it is going pretty well for Russia. But I think he's beginning to think slightly in a wider context in his planning of actions in the coming months, and that is the BRICS summit in Moscow, where Russia is presiding. And I think this is by far more important to him because in BRICS, he is positioning himself to be, at least for a while, the agenda-setting person for the BRICS association, and also for the global south. And I think for Putin, this is a priority. He kept on talking in his speeches about the development of the Far East and about the new trades, new oil pipeline to China, and selling oil to India, and development of the whole Far East and the ASEAN countries, etc., etc. So I think that this is his priority. Now, also, this is a topic for a separate presentation, perhaps, but some important things are coming up at BRICS summit in Moscow. And the most important that concerns the United States is de-dollarization. And what is most likely to happen is the setting up of a new trade exchange mechanism, bypassing SWIFT and bypassing the dollar. And in the long run, this may be the most important outcome of this competition with the United States, or rather the US attempt to exclude Russia from the world trade. This is what Putin says back to the United States. You want to exclude us? Okay, well, now you have it. We're going to have a separate system of exchanges. if there are banks that would be sanctioned by the US for trade with Russia, then we will have a different system that you would not have any control of, and it would not be traceable. So this is the Putin's offer. Now, the implication of that offer is that Putin is not talking to Zelensky and not talking to people around him, such as Podolyak and Yatsenyuk and all the others who keep on saying what they have been saying. Putin's message is to the Ukrainian opposition, to those people who are going to respond, perhaps. And I'll come back to this, but let me first go to Ramstein. Now, the meeting in Ramstein just ended yesterday, and the decision and the speeches made were very indicative. Now, Zelensky actually showed that there's no change in his position. He says he wants peace, but on the condition of defeating Russia. He still dreams of defeating Russia, and he keeps talking about involving the entire free world and the entire NATO, and we're stronger than and of course it's defense of democracy versus authoritarianism, and so forth. And he, of course, wants new missiles and new armaments and heating back deep into Russia. And we know all this. But the important thing, of course, is that Defense Secretary Austin said that no, it will not change the game, not a game changer, as he put it. And so this brings me to discuss a little bit the internal politics in Ukraine and the meaning of American position. Now, the domestic politics of Ukraine is beginning to be very interesting because this week Kuleba was fired or resigned. There is a reshuffle of cabinet in Ukraine, and several important people were out and other people were in. And the ones that are in are supposed to be, by the tight judgment of specialists, very close to Yermak, who just went to Washington, who asked for missiles, who has his own political agenda. But this is all a group of people who are intransigent. They want to strike deeper into Russia. They want to continue the war. They want to win, etc., etc. However, the domestic situation in Ukraine is not very favorable to Zelensky, because all political parties are pretty much banned. But even more important, those people who had worked with him are sort of out one by one. And these are important and prominent people. Well, I shall start with Arestovich, who is in the West, who was an advisor to President Zelensky. And one can go on to General Zaluzhny, who was fired probably because Zelensky was jealous of his power and success. And now it is Kuleba. So there's a number of politicians who have world recognition of their names, who are now beginning to say different things. For example, Arestovich recently said that you have to sign on Russia's conditions. It is better to lose 4 provinces than to lose the entire Ukraine. And that would give us a chance to rebuild and restore and become a normal country one more time, etc., etc. So there are voices in Ukraine who are saying that one has to recognize the reality and sign what Putin is offering. Now, of course, you also should know, which the Western media doesn't cover this, but there's also a very tense situation domestically in Ukraine. The Russian Orthodox Church is banned. The priests are being arrested. Any expression of Russianness is being persecuted. There was a girl of 13 years old who was singing a Russian song, and she was arrested, then released, just for singing a popular Russian song. So the more important, of course, is the draft dodging movement. Ukrainian men are hiding from being drafted. There are daily scenes that one could see on Telegraph channels, a variety of them, how people are being grabbed on the streets and pushed into buses, and then their women, their mothers and wives are fighting with those collectors of draftees, and there's a wide movement of resistance against being drafted to Ukrainian army. Young men are dressing as women, the young men are sitting at home, they're not going to work, they're hiding in the villages, they're trying to walk across the border to Ukraine, from Ukraine to Romania, etc., etc. So these are indications of troubled times. The cabinet reshuffle, the catastrophic casualties at the front. According to some Russian telegraph sources, 40,000 Ukrainians were killed over the last few weeks since the beginning of the Kursk offensive. So in other words, there's trouble for Zelensky in his own country, and it is by far couldn't be called by any stretch of an imagination a democracy at this point. Now, the US position, a few words about this. Austin said this is not a game changer. In other words, the American position is to keep Ukraine afloat. And there was another package of whatever, 200 something million granted. But at the same time, the missiles were promised but not given. In other words, the message of Americans to the Ukraine is you keep on fighting and we will support your defense, but we will not support your offense into Russia. So this generates actually quite serious feeling of resentment among the Ukrainians, among the Zelensky type Ukrainians, the nationalists and others, who are beginning to speak about sort of a theory close to what the Germans had in World War I, a stab in the back theory. In other words, we're winning the war. We can go into Russia. We can even go into Kursk. We have shown that the Russians are weak, and the United States doesn't want to give us everything we can. And so this is a kind of a position that prepares them a possible retreat if they lose power. And blame everything on the Americans. I should say that the Americans are aware of this, and there's beginning to be a resentment towards Zelensky, which barely could be hidden by President Biden as well, and that the Ukrainians are ungrateful, and no matter what you do for them, they ask for more, and the results are not there to be seen. So this is another interesting aspect as the beginning tension between the proponents of the war. And finally, I'd like to say a couple of words concerning a possible Russian response. Many analysts in the West are saying Russia is bluffing, Russia cannot use nukes, and there's nothing they can do, and they're weak, and as it continues the same story. Russia is weak, Russia is bluffing. Well, let me put something like this. I watch Russian debates all the time, and here's a few things that are being discussed in the Russian public space, different talk shows and specialists and analysts and so on, what they could do if America indeed granted permission or given the missiles to strike deep into Russia. Well, they're talking about defensive measures, that they already put all the aircraft far away, farther from the reach, and Russia is big enough to move them hundreds of kilometers away from the border, etc. But they also say that the Russian response does not have to be nuclear. If American missiles strikes into Russian airfield with conventional weapons, Russian specialists say, well, we could do just the same to Ramstein. If the Americans provide the missiles and the guiding and the intelligence and the targeting, then we could do the same. Now, to start with, maybe not in Ramstein, but many, many places around the world that are vulnerable. There are American bases in Iraq, and in other places in Bahrain and Middle East that could easily be destroyed by proxies and not necessarily by Russia themselves. Well, one other idea was to give weapons to Houthis who can sink an American aircraft carrier, and many other ways of exerting proxy pressure on the Americans the same way as they do to Russia through Ukraine. So nuclear is not the only option open. There are many other ones, including, by the way, shooting satellites with no human life lost, the guidings utilized that provide intelligence to the Ukrainian army. In other words, the Russians still have, as they discuss, a number of options besides nuclear to inflict pain on the United States military, but they're not doing it. And I'm thinking quite surely they're not doing it because Putin doesn't let them, and he doesn't let them because he wants to wait what is going to be the result of American elections. If it is Trump, the hope is that they can work out the deal. If it is Harris, there's also a lot of talk that I will talk separately in a different video, that Harris will be different. And in which way different, this is a topic for a separate discussion. In any case, this is the situation in early September, and these are the nuances of the political positions taken by Zelensky and by Putin and by Austin. And thank you very much. And I hope you will subscribe. I hope you will buy my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin, which is a lot of history, but the last chapter is devoted to Putin's presidency. And I hope you will leave your comments. I like those very much. I enjoy reading them and responding to them. And until next time, goodbye.